At this time, I'm going to ask Matt Ryerson to come up and speak just from a community's perspective, because again, I want to say this is our call to the community to help and embrace. We don't have the answers for all of this, but we're going to do this together for the future of the students in Knox County.
Good morning. It's great to see you all. It's great to see the kids and their teachers and leadership here. You know, it's a week like this that I think Knoxvillians and our community are really built for. If we know anything about the state of Tennessee and Knoxville in particular, it's that in times of challenge, we tend to rise to the occasion. And I really believe that this report coming out is going to stir in people and energy and enthusiasm to really double down investment into our schools and most importantly our children and families. As a parent and as a community member and a community leader in our organization at the United Way, I'm really proud of this team at the schools. Not because the results are what we wanted them to be, but ultimately because they are looking at the data, owning the data, and making a plan of how to execute on improving the statistics that we have. We do have some shining stars that we're here today as a great example of these particular students and this team, and that can be a reality for every student in every school. At the United Way, we stand ready to be a partner not just with the schools, but really a partner with the community to leverage the resources that we have in this community to truly make a difference, because I think that's what we really have to look at. As John mentioned, as leadership at this school talked about, it really is a holistic approach. If a child is hungry when they arrive at school, school and academics are going to be a challenge. If we have elementary students with truancy issues, attendance issues, that's a family issue, not a child issue. If we have children that don't know where they're going to put their head at night, the idea of excelling at academics is probably not a reality. So when we look at these issues, when we look at the community challenges we have, it truly is holistic. It has to be not only holistic and recognizing it as a challenge, but holistic in our approach to addressing those issues. So we have some incredible community partners, over 100 community partners that really leverage their resources to invest in our schools and our students and those families. And we look to increase that investment here in the near future. So we thank you for coming out. We appreciate it. John, am I handing it off?
We appreciate everybody being here today, and we're going to open it up for some questions. Yes.
Dr. Roswick or Carly, what's the status on the truancy initiative? Many years ago, the District Attorney General and Judge Irwin had a truancy initiative. Parents didn't have the adequate number of mommy notes. They had to go to a meeting at a high school, and it seems that, I don't know if that's dropped off, but if it is dropped off, is that the reason that we now have a problem?
Yeah, thank you for that's a good question. So I think that we have to remember over the last few school years when we've been working through the COVID-19 pandemic, grace was given in a lot of ways, right? Whereas it looks at one of those things definitely was attendance, right? We wanted to be cognizant of things like isolation and quarantine and how that could impact student and staff attendance, right? So for this year, actually, we are going to relaunch that initiative with those meetings and hope to get the court system back involved in that process. We will be launching that regionally as well. So hopefully we can get find a custom approach to doing that to fit the need of each region.
When you set the plan for launching that, can you make sure Carly sends that out to everybody?
Yes, sir. I think we can do that.
I'll just tell everybody, that's Jason Myers, by the way. He's our Assistant Superintendent of Student Success. So he social workers and truancy, those things fall under his as well as some other things. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
If you had to give KCS a grade, A through F, one per grade reading, what would it be?
Well, let me say this first. You know, I'm not a big fan of that part of the grading system because I think there's a lot of nuances that go into that. What I'll say about third grade reading is we typically have been around 40% proficient, and I always want to make sure this is clear. in the state of Tennessee, we applaud the state. Very rigorous standards to get proficient. So that's clear first of all. That doesn't mean 60% of our kids can't read anything. It just means that they're not meeting the proficiency levels in 3rd grade. 40% again is not where we want to be, and so I think we really have to look at we talked about engaging, parents really from that birth until we get them into kindergarten. Really looking at those things. We have some pre-K programs. It's not universal pre-K, but what are we doing in that space before? And then we really have to look at kindergarten through 2nd grade and what we're doing in there to be able to identify gaps early, so that we can start those interventions early. So kind of 3rd grade is the first time we get a real number for where students are. And so at that point, Knox County traditionally has done a really good job by 4th and 5th grade closing a lot of those gaps. So I would say we have work to do still to make sure, and I think those are some of the areas that we can target to try to get better at that. And I think we will. I think this is again that call to the community. You heard Matt Ryerson kind of speak to, what can we do in those spaces where there are gaps. We don't have early childhood. I know United Way's got some great stuff going on there with their Right Start program, and I think it's going to take that kind of effort from the community to try to get students at a better place by the time they come to kindergarten.
And where do these scores fall compared to pre-pandemic?
So good question. So our achievement scores we actually saw and I think we released that a little earlier when the way the state rolls out data, the achievement, and then kind of the accountabilities come out now. But in our elementary and middle, we saw in our English language arts that those are kind of back to where they were prior to that. We made gains pretty much everywhere else in high school and then also in math, but we're not back to those levels that we were yet in math. English has rebounded a little quicker than we have in math. But again, I think what we're trying to look at today too, this is really talking a lot about growth. There were other districts that made growth faster than we did this year. And so those are places where we think we still have room to improve and get better. And we ultimately want to raise that achievement score higher too.
So following up on growth, because it can be tricky, you can have low growth scores at both high achieving schools and lower achieving schools. Do you see it, is that more of a problem at schools that are testing better but aren't showing growth, or is it kind of across the board?
I'm actually going to let Dr. Norton, our Assistant Superintendent of Strategy, she's in that data. I mean, I've seen the overall, but she'll be able to take that closer than I will. Go ahead.
Thank you for that question. I think generally speaking, we're seeing similarities across most of our schools in terms of what their data is looking like as it relates to TVOS. So we are seeing that we have a lot of schools that had lower TVOS this year than in previous years, which is a trend that is kind of holding across the state as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so it's not more concentrated in lower achieving schools or higher achieving schools?
No, it's sort of across the board.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What are some of the unique challenges at these schools on the priority list, and how do you plan to work within those challenges to improve the academic performance and growth of those schools?
I'll give you a little overall, and then I'm actually going to have Dr. Murphy come and speak maybe to some of the strategies, because as you guys know, again, I don't want to assume because it's also fairly new, but Region 5 is the region he's the regional director over, and all 4 of those schools fall in that region. I would say this, historically, we've seen some schools in that have kind of bounced back and forth on lists in given years. So I'm going to let him speak to the strategy we have moving forward.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Dr. Murphy. I'm the Regional 5 Director. Some of the challenges we see are pretty much a lot of the challenges we see across all the rest of the schools as well. But what we're doing is really attaching our school support leadership team across the district to make sure that we're rallying around what we want to see within our school plans, right? So we're focusing on that. We're looking at the data really strategically and really supporting our principals on a weekly to weekly basis. So really just supporting them really. So also with our teachers, we want to make sure that we are supporting them with engagement. That's one of our core strategies. Also with engagement, we want to make sure we have a classroom build-to-build high instruction. We're focusing on that as well. So making sure we're just rallying our troops around them as well. So, yeah.
Do teachers have the autonomy to change their lessons to accommodate the students that they have in the classroom from season to season, semester to semester, however?
I'm actually going to let Dr. Wilson. It's great we have the team here because you guys are getting to see the whole team, so that's good. It's good. I want to make sure we're answering the questions thoroughly. But I'm going to have Dr. Wilson, our Assistant Superintendent of Academics, come and address that for you.
Thank you for your question. So absolutely, we know that the power of a teacher in the classroom who can speak to the needs of the students is paramount to student success. I think we've seen examples of that here today. And Dr. Reiswick mentioned our high quality instructional materials as being a focus, and I think with those, really the focus is on making sure that we're constantly engaging students in grade level content, making sure that again when they leave third grade we can ensure that they've been exposed to and are mastering the skills needed to meet that third grade standard. But within that we have to do some additional thinking. We talked about small groups, or Dr. Atkins did. Had to do some additional thinking about what skill gaps students may have so that we do our job in terms of helping them access those grade level materials. That may mean that we're accelerating learning on the front end. It may mean some remediation on the back end. And that's really where that teacher autonomy and discernment needs to come in, is to really know that group of students in their classroom and decide how those materials are used for that student population.
Y'all have any other questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could go into detail about those targeted improvement schools and student groups that were specifically kind of lower performing in some of those schools. If there was a trend, or if it was different at all the schools.
I'll say this real quick, and I know that's probably a good follow-up question for Dr. Norton at some point to kind of talk through, because so we had 25 schools that fell into that focus category for that you mentioned before, priority schools, and so what that means for the 4 schools who were in the priority ranking, that means they were in the bottom 5% of schools overall across the state. When you get to focus schools, it gets a little nuanced in how we get to that. So it all has to do with, I would summarize this way, and again, Dr. Norton will be able to give you probably a better one-on-one about the individual 25 schools, but it really gets into individual student groups. Both of those, ATSI and TSI, look at an individual group within a district. That could be economically disadvantaged, it could be students with disabilities, it could be ELL population, it could be the BHN or Black, Hispanic, Native American. So every one of those schools then, it's based on where that student group performs, sometimes against the rest of the state, and then also sometimes it's kind of weird, but if that student group were a standalone school compared to the schools that are in that CSI category. So if you want to follow up with Dr. Norton, she can probably speak specific to each one of those. They all have different ones. I don't know if there's one trend across the board. Typically what we see is the major driver is economically disadvantaged, no matter what. That usually is one that kind of drives that, but she can speak more specifically to that if you want to follow up with her. Okay.
All right, thank you all again for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And if you have somebody who wants to talk to you one-on-one.
Is it okay if my kids answer y'all some questions about your job?